So welcome everybody to our webinar this evening. We're just waiting for a final few people to join, but we're going to kick off. So my name's Sophia. I work for the Officers Association as one of the business development team. And I have my colleague Keith joining me this evening, who will be talking us through the topic of getting the most out of networking events. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Keith Spencer. Keith is a career consultant at the Officers Association. Keith has served in the Royal Air Force with a background in HR and training, and headed up the Armed Forces Resettlement Programme across the Tri-Services. Keith also has a background in executive and leadership coaching, and he's going to take us through the topic of networking and how to make the most of it in terms of your transition and job search. So over to you, Keith, and some of what we're going to cover in tonight's webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia, for that lovely introduction. Good evening to you, and good evening to everyone out there. So today's webinar, very simple. We're going to just split it down into three areas, really. Before the event and any preparation you ought to be doing, some considerations at the event, and then actions on, things to do after the event. So we'll approach it in that way. So Sophia, if we can go on to the next slide, and I think we'll start by launching a quick poll question, I believe. So hopefully you're all voting on this at the moment, thinking about what your responses are. What are you going to do before attending an event?
So before I attend the networking event, I'm going to have developed my 30-second elevator pitch, have a pocket full of personal business cards to hand out, an expectation of getting a job, considered how the event fits with my marketing campaign, or E, have a stiff drink because I hate networking, and share the results with you. So hopefully you're seeing that on your screen now. 63% of the audience said that they would develop their 30-second elevator pitch. 25% of the audience would have a pocket full of personal business cards, and 13% would have a stiff drink because they hate networking. Some good reactions there, and hopefully we're going to be able to go to some tips to make the most out of that.
Yeah, well, I think we will actually. Hopefully we'll meet the 13% at our event next week for the Focus on Defence Networking evening.
Absolutely, yeah, and hopefully put some of that into practice. So, Keith, I suppose a question before the event: why would you go to a networking event and make small talk with, strangers, people you don't know, when you've got some great technological solutions like LinkedIn? Why is it important to go and have those face-to-face meetings?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Sophia. Yeah, I mean, clearly LinkedIn, fantastic. It's a great enabler for networking and for marketing yourself. And there's a number of resources through the OA that can help you with your LinkedIn and developing your profile, some of the courses that we put on. So certainly not suggesting you don't use LinkedIn, you must. But at the end of the day, if we stop and think about it, it's people that buy people. And we know from our clients that a significant majority, in excess of 70%, tell us that they find their next role through active networking. And given that networking is all about sharing your capabilities into that hidden job market, why not actually be present and in control of it and do it yourself? So making a strong impression, and obviously making that strong impression for the right reasons, to a new contact at a networking event could lead to a great inside connection and help smooth your path through the recruitment process. So maybe instead of thinking about it as making small talk with strangers, let's reframe that thought and think more of it as a way of getting to connect with people with what used to perhaps seem like a barrier to the hidden jobs market.
So we'll move back on to, we're just looking at what the best ways to go about in-person networking as well, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, certainly. So it certainly requires some investment. Investment of time particularly. You've obviously got to get to events, be at the events, and then follow up effectively afterwards. So if you're thinking about that, then it implies that you want to make the most of that investment and to be comfortable doing it, so that you radiate confidence, you make a good impression, and you inspire trust with the new connections that you're meeting with. The clear implication about that is let's do some prior preparation, because as we all know, that's a preventer of poor performance. And I think you know what I'm saying there with the 7 Ps. So do give some thought to how the event fits in with your overall job search strategy. Now that's an interesting one, because here am I saying that was the 0% that people did on their original poll. That's, I guess, why we do the polls, to have a bit of a debate about this. The vast majority thought they should develop their 30-second elevator pitch. Now, it's really important, and I will talk about getting your head around what your proposition is, but I've never yet come across anybody who's managed to get a job in a lift. And in networking, actually, you're trying to build relationships and make connections. You're not trying to sell something to somebody. The days of the hard sell are over, and if people get a sniff of self-interest, they'll be off. So it's not about pitching at somebody and moving on. So in terms of preparation, what you want to do is just give some thought to how the event's going to fit in with your overall job search strategy. So I would say to you, only go to events if you're genuinely interested, because networks are held together by trust and authenticity. And then think about, what am I actually trying to achieve here? Okay, the ultimate aim of your campaign, of course, is about getting a job. But actually at the event, it's not about getting a job. It's about getting information. It's about establishing new connections and creating some one-on-one opportunities that will, hopefully, over time, smooth your way to that job. So one of the other things to think about then is, who am I seeking to network with and why? So have a plan. Go with a plan. Be ready to engage with the sort of people that you're looking to meet. Have some topics thought through about what to talk about, some questions, perhaps some relevant stories that explain your value in what you've done in an engaging way, because all that leads to approachability. And what is your proposition? So let's just spend a little bit of time thinking about that. Give some ordered thought to understanding what you want people to take away. So what you are, what you do, what you're interested in, and what you can actually offer them. Some questions you might find useful, perhaps, in getting that ordered thought together is just to reflect on your career so far and to ask yourself the question, what are you actually known for? And what would you hope people would say when they recommend you? And what do people say about your experience and your skills? And what would people say about your areas of expertise and knowledge? And also, what makes you a bit different? Because that's useful to think about how you might be able to help connections. How do you stand out, and how might that all lead to a conversation? So if you can think those through and get some answers to those questions, in summary, you'll have a clear understanding of what you do, why you do it, who you do it for, and what makes you doing it a bit special. In terms of some of the practical aspects of preparing for going to a network event, then, you know, yes, a pocket full of business cards, that's not wrong. Make sure you do carry them. This does appear to be very last century, as my daughter might say, given all the social media technology we've got nowadays. But actually, the business card is still there and useful as a physical reminder of who you've met and the opportunity to you know, get in contact afterwards. Certainly make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date before you go and is coherent with and reflects your proposition. So if someone looks you up afterwards, the story, the narrative you've told them will be coherent. There won't be any dissonance from that. because let's assume positively that you make a good connection and they are interested enough to look you up afterwards.
So, Keith, the question we've had in is, can you still be a good networker even if you're not naturally confident? So even if, we had the sort of joke answer at the end of having a stiff drink beforehand and, because you don't really know to enjoy it. Can you still be effective if that's not something you sort of feel naturally confident about?
Yes, most definitely you can, because I think most people, if they were being honest, will admit to a degree of trepidation at going to an event and meeting new people. That's perfectly normal. This isn't networking as a skill and an art, isn't all about being the loudest voice in the room and slapping backs. So, if you're not naturally confident and sociable, then certainly you can still be a great networker, because networking is about being authentic. It's about building trust and relationships and seeing how you can actually help others within the network. It's not about work in the room. It's about relationship building, and also how you network says a lot about you. So actually just be genuine and be yourself. And also people who tend maybe towards being a bit quieter or being a bit introvert actually tend towards being better listeners. And listening is a key to having a good conversation. And we'll move on to that once we've gone through our second poll question.
Okay, fantastic. So the second poll question tonight is really looking at sort of at the event. So I'm just going to launch that poll for us now. And really what we're looking at for this is, at the networking event itself, is it most important to A, create a positive impression, B, have conversations with new contacts, C, catch up with old friends, D, have copies of my CV to hand out, or E, cut the chit-chat, pitch on and move quickly? Brilliant. So I think we've got the majority of our votes in now there, so I'll close that and share the results. So 56% of our audience thought it's most important to create a positive impression. 33% have conversations with new contacts, and 11% is a good opportunity to catch up with old friends.
Right, okay, that's great. Now, there's a degree of truth to all of those. I'm pleased to see people avoided the poo trap of, work in the room, handing out their CVs and things like that. So having a conversation really is a key one, because during having that conversation, you will make that good impression. I'll just touch on that business about catching up with old friends, because I think probably the respondees thought, yeah, well, catching up with old friends, it's part of my network, isn't it? I think by that I was saying avoid, what the point I wanted to bring out with that one, I think, was avoid treating a networking event as a way of just catching up with old mates and sort of spending your time having a drink with them in the corner. I've seen it a lot, where there's employers in the room, interesting people to talk to, and you get just a gaggle of the ex-military guys who perhaps haven't seen each other for a while, swinging the light, talking about old dits and whatever, and perhaps missing the opportunity to get out and miss some new people. So try and avoid doing that. If you catch up with some old guys and you want to have a drink, then meet afterwards, move on to the pub after the event is probably the message. So it is about having a conversation.
So at the event itself, I suppose one of the questions is, how important is your attitude and approach at these events?
Yeah, I mean that's really, really key actually in coming across, being able to make those new connections effectively. Let's be honest, networking events, on the face of it, can appear stale, artificial, and perhaps a bit transactional, but only if you let them be that way. If you think of it in another way, as having a meaningful conversation with some new contacts, and that actually can be enjoyable and productive. So having that conversation, remember, is a balance between talking and listening, and is actually an important skill. So let's just think about and offer a few tips really about having that conversation. within the context of a networking event. I think it's really, first and foremost, important to actually be present in the conversation, not halfway in it and halfway out of it. Again, just observing at networking events, you quite often see people supposedly having a conversation, but they're actually looking over the shoulder, distracted by someone else coming in, looking at their watch, or what, when are the drinks coming round, and they're not actually present in the conversation. So, pay attention to what the contact or the connection you're making is actually saying. Now, you will have undoubtedly heard of all sorts of tricks about how to show people that you're paying attention. Good old eye contact, nodding, repeating back what they might have said. But actually, the best way of showing you're paying attention is actually to pay attention. So listen, because listening forces you to pay attention. No man has ever listened their way out of a job. Plenty have talked their way out of one. So if you go into it with the attitude and the assumption that you've got something to learn, that's a good starting point. And then from there, see if you can look out for what we call the common point of interest. The common point of interest, that's the essential element of a successful conversation. Because if you can find that common point of interest between you, you can make a connection, everybody feels that little bit more comfortable, and then you can move on. Now, questions, asking questions of somebody. Try and remember the good old open questions. So open questions are those that start with who, what, where, when, and how. So, for example, what do you enjoy most about your work is an example of that sort of question. And it's actually quite a good question because it gets people talking and thinking about, what is it about work that I actually enjoy? What is it about that role, that sector that's good? And then you can start also, when you're listening, thinking about, is that a match with what I want, with my fit, my culture and values and things like that? But certainly when we're talking about questions, as a minimum, make sure you actually ask, what advice can you give me? And who else do you recommend I should be talking to? So in the conversation, be passionate. Be passionate about the subjects that interest you, and come across as genuine. But try and guard against holding forth and pontificating at somebody. Do let people get a word in edgeways, which I think is why there's a danger in going into the room with your idea about, I've got a 30-second elevator pitch here and I've got to get that across to as many people as possible. Relax, have a conversation, do some listening, learn some stuff, and then respond back. And, when responding back, tell stories. People like that. Color it with examples, events that have happened, funny stories, whatever it is. But remember to be, reasonably succinct and to the point, and stay out of the weeds, because people don't have infinite interest. And another tip is, if you don't know something, don't pretend you do, because looking to establish yourself as someone worth knowing, it's not about the hard sell. And if you're trying to be something you're not, then people will find you out. Now, if you've done all of that, and you've done that well, then you've had a great conversation with someone, and you'll have created the opportunity during that to get your proposition across to someone who's actually equally prepared to listen. Remember that the focus is actually on building a relationship here and getting to know people. People by people. I've said that before, I'll repeat it again. People will buy people. And whether they're thinking about it at the time or whether it's subconsciously, they're going through a 3-stage process of know, like, and trust. So I've got to know somebody, I actually quite like them, I'd like to meet them again. As I meet them more often, I'm going to build up a trusting relationship with them, and that's when the job offers start to flow in. Okay, I think quality over quantity is an important thing to remember. You're looking to make enough of a connection to be remembered in a positive light, so that the business card is just a backup. As I say, don't feel the need to work the whole room. It's better to leave with a couple of business cards as a reminder of people that you made a real connection with than just loads of cards from people you didn't really connect with. And then that way, ideally, you'll have prepared the ground for a follow-up meeting. If you can arrange that before you part company, then that's fantastic. And a couple of final things, I think, really from me at the event is be positive. People don't like moaners, so try and avoid, moaning about the traffic, moaning that the wine's too warm or whatever it might be. Eeyore is a cute character, but you're unlikely to want to go and employ him. So be positive, smile, and enjoy yourself.
So, Keith, we've had an interesting question, and it's probably now a good point to ask it, and it's a sort of two-part question. One is around how when you're having a conversation and you realise that actually it's for yourself, it's not a conversation that you want to continue, and probably the other person's feeling exactly the same thing. How do you move away from that conversation politely? And also on the converse side, how do you avoid being too pushy? So if you think you're onto a good thing, you've met somebody that you think actually this guy's got a great job that I really want. How do you strike that balance between, being seen as sort of too keen and too overtly pushy at a networking event as well?
Or whatever.
You're a bit desperate, So it's that sort of two. It's how do you leave a conversation you're not interested in, and how, when you are interested, how do you make sure you don't seem over keen?
Yeah. Okay. Let's just deal with the latter element first. I think when you've reached that point, and as long as you've made a connection, you could suggest at that point that you meet up afterwards, one-to-one, for a networking meeting to explore this further. So, it's been really interesting conversation. I think we'd probably both like to carry this on afterwards. There's obviously lots of other people we'd like to talk to this evening, so let's exchange cards. When are you free? Let's check diaries, connect on LinkedIn, and then arrange to meet. And then sort of just be confident enough to park it there and leave it alone before you over-egg the pudding, as it were. On the first one about, well, there you are, you're in a conversation with someone, you realise that this really isn't going anywhere. But how can you park it politely, as opposed to just sort of go, oh, I've just seen someone across the other side of the room I really must talk to. Bye. One way to do it is actually use it perhaps to your advantage as a way to move into another group. So by all means say, now there's someone over there that you might be interested to meet because of what you've been talking about, the subject or whatever. So you can sort of move off and join that other group and make an introduction. That person will probably be very grateful to you. It helps to foster the idea that you're someone worth knowing because you've got other contacts as well, and you can introduce them and then perhaps stay for a moment, and then gives you the opportunity to move on. So that might be a way of parking that politely.
And I suppose from that, how do you encourage other people to come into groups, or how do you join a group? So you're sort of standing on your own, you're outside of the circle, wondering, I don't know anyone in the room. How do I approach them, and how do I join a group? How do I get into a conversation when I don't know the person that I'm approaching?
Okay, I suppose winding that back to the start. I mean, you can actually try to form them yourself. So one tip might well be to arrive on time. Then you'll probably be greeted by the organisers, get to talk to them. They can make an introduction to some of the key guests in the room, and you're off and running. You've formed your own group. If that doesn't happen and you arrive a bit late and you're walking into the room, I mean, I'd reference Colin Tweedy, who was our sort of networking expert who came to speak to our symposium in London before Christmas, and I don't know whether some of our listeners were there and might recall Colin. I mean, he talked about this subject specifically, actually, about seeking what he called open groups. So let's deal with the closed group first. So if you've got a pair of people in intent conversation together, chest to chest, eye contact to eye contact, actually the advice would be don't break into that group, because nobody's going to thank you for doing that because you've broken a conversation they're enjoying. But actually, if they're stood slightly apart and their body language is a little bit more open, then there is the third point of a triangle available to you, and you can just step on that third point of the triangle, a quick "may I join you," and then you're in. And that equally applies to groups of 3 or 4. So if there's a closed triangle or a closed square, it's tricky. Store it up for later if it's a group that you want to get into. Keep an eye on it, but move on by on that first pass, I would suggest, because again, no one's going to be to like you if you're going to be shoehorning in. So if it's a closed tight triangle or a closed square, avoid it, move on. But if you can see that there's a spot there from the body language, the triangle is open, the square is open, then just simply step into that open area, "may I join you," and carry on. That won't be seen in an adverse light. It is a networking event after all. People will be expecting that to happen. And you've got the old singleton idea, as I mentioned to before. So if you are with somebody just one-on-one, you can use that position to sort of move into a group and form a larger group with a "may I introduce you to whoever." Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So I think we've covered the points of, at the event, how do you approach it? And I suppose the most important thing is you've had a great time. What do you do after the event and how you follow up? So I think we've got our next poll question. So I'll just move us on to that, poll question 3, which is: after the networking event, you should first A, book the next one, B, follow up with the contacts in a timely fashion, C, reflect on what you've learned, and D, drop a note of thanks to the organiser as well. So the two answers, Keith, we've got a 75% would follow up with contacts in a timely fashion, and 25% would reflect on what they've learned.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair split, to be honest. That's pretty accurate. There's a couple of pointless answers there. So it doesn't look like we're going to get any notes of thanks for our event next week then, Sophia, so don't expect that.
That's it, we're
done. Okay, no, that's good.
Okay, so on that, Keith, what are the most important things to think about after the event, and how do you make sure you keep up that momentum?
Yeah, I mean, it is that business about don't let any momentum you created go to waste. So it's about timely follow-up. So you made a connection, you met some interesting people, send a LinkedIn invitation to them as soon as possible. Don't just connect, I would personalize that message, refer to the conversation that you had with them, and seek to connect with them on LinkedIn. Remember what I said earlier as well, networking is as much about giving as well as gaining. So if in the course of conversations you promise something, it might be to connect them to somebody else, perhaps send a useful link around something that you were talking about, do it. Make sure you actually do it and follow through, because it reinforces that idea of somebody that is useful to know and actually follows through on what they say. It helps to establish and reinforce your presence. Organize a follow-up meeting to make sure that you connect deeper and build the relationship. So that's all part of that timely follow-up. And to some extent, although it was a pointless answer, book the next one. Actually, make networking a habit. So do get used to reaching out to new people as something that you normally do. Certainly is the case outside in civilian life, where networking isn't just about finding the next role, it's actually about finding the next piece of business as well. There's a lot of business-to-business networking goes on. And if you work in some of the business development areas, certainly in marketing, a week wouldn't go by where you're not actually out there at some sort of networking business event, creating contacts and looking to create business. But for us, looking, at this stage, make sure, as well as making networking a habit, make sure that you nurture your network. You've created it, you've put some effort into making it, so look after it, because you're never actually going to stop needing it. Because at some point, when you move on again, your network will have seen you develop in the roles that you've done and will be there to help make onward referrals. So those are really the key messages about follow-up. Timely follow-up with the immediate sort of actions on afterwards. Make it a habit and nurture that network. Keep in contact with people and keep that network alive. It's really important, I think, as you move out of the forces and the forces environment, to keep yourself on the radar.
And we're getting some final questions in, and I think we've actually had a really nice comment in about actually something that your military training teaches you about, sort of group dynamics, is welcoming people into groups and giving as much as you're taking as well from networking, and sort of some of those military traits can be carried through into networking about if you're prepared to offer something as much as for being prepared to take something as well from the networking event, and that's sort of important sort of values, I suppose, that you can bring to a networking scenario.
Definitely, yeah,
that's an important scenario, yeah. and an important trait that you have in the military that you can bring through into sort of your civilian networking as well. Yeah. So Keith, before we move to some more final questions, I think it might be good just to sort of summarise what we've covered in tonight's webinar, and as a sort of follow-on for people to think about. So we've got the summary slide up there of what's been taught tonight around preparation and practice.
So the summary of what's been learnt tonight is first and foremost preparation before you go, and practice makes perfect. Networking is a skill just like any other and can be learnt. Always keep a focus on that idea that it's people who buy people, and you are getting yourself onto that know, like, trust continuum in creating the connections and building the relationship. Conversation is an art, and remember the points there that I was making about being able to sustain coherent conversations with people, and the importance about listening as much as talking, and that it's not about the hard sell. It's about creating a meaningful conversation which gets your sort of genuine capabilities across. And finally, have a positive attitude towards it. I know people have misgivings going into networking, but try and reframe those as it being not a trial by canapé, but actually an opportunity to meet some interesting and helpful connections.
And I think, just to find out and picking up one of your other points, enjoy and have fun at them, because these are, they might seem like scary things, but they're actually can be quite enjoyable experience as well. So keep that positive attitude, as you're saying, and enjoy them as an activity in themselves as well to do. So. Yeah. We've just got a final few questions, Keith, that have come through.
Okay, good.
One is around sort of recruiters, because at networking events we have a variety of different people attend. So there'll be service leavers, or potentially people that have left the services and they continue with their networking, through to companies that are offering advice and guidance, and through to actually companies that are sometimes looking to recruit as well. Mm-hmm. Do you, in your experience, do you think recruiters use these as a potential screening for candidates or interviews and talent spotting? Is that something you've seen, and how should our audience sort of approach that and be prepared for that?
Okay, I think it's fair to say, Sophia, and obviously you've had conversations with the sort of recruiters that are interested to come along to our events. I don't think they're there as much to screen or to do anything like that, but I think they're there to offer sort of help, advice and assistance about how to present yourself, how to put your proposition together, that sort of thing. So recruiters, I wouldn't see recruiters as the enemy or to have any concerns about them, I think it'd be perfectly reasonable to have a good conversation with somebody who is a recruiter, tap them up for their knowledge about what's hot and what's not in the local area or whatever it might be. And it's having a good relationship with a recruiter is no bad thing.
Absolutely. And another question we've had in is around, can you find out is it a good idea to find out who's attending beforehand as well? I know in our experience, people sign up and not everyone attends the networking events. I suppose that's another top tip is to, if you sign up, make sure you do attend, even if it's sometimes the last thing you want to do on a wet Thursday evening. Make sure you use the opportunity to present it as well. But would you suggest that people try and find out who's attending beforehand? Is that and doing that in terms of doing their research as well?
Yes, if you can. And I know, Sophia, you and I have had a conversation about this actually, haven't we, in terms of attendance lists and things like that and their availability. But if they are available and if it is possible to find out who's going to be at the event, then obviously that is helpful to your prior preparation and your research about who you're looking to approach and why.
And even if you can't get them beforehand, there'll often be a delegate list available on the night as well. Yeah. So you make sure you take one of those away. And sometimes if you've not made the connection with the person that you were hoping to on the evening, there's the opportunity to follow up with them afterwards and say, I noticed you were due to attend the networking event. Sorry, I didn't get to connect, but this is the question I had. So if you've made the effort to attend, then you've then got the go-ahead to follow up with people, even if you didn't meet them there on the evening itself, because it shows that you had an interest in the event and they had an interest in the event as well by both signing up. So use that as an opportunity to connect afterwards as well. And I think one final question we've had in is about, and we get this question a lot at the Officers Association, is what do you wear? What do you wear to a networking event, and how do you prepare for that as well? Because, military networking events or military events, dress code is important. You're now going into a civilian environment. How do you make that right judgment call?
Okay, well, for OA events specifically, we go with business casual. So for gentlemen, that would be, open neck shirt with a jacket, side of it, and equivalent for ladies. Outside the OA environment, at other networking events, if the organizer doesn't actually say, and quite often they do, they'll say actually on the invitation or the flyer for it, what the dress code is. If they don't, and it's something you really want to know, then obviously just get in contact with them and ask. But in any event, I would say, if in doubt, dress up rather than down. So if that means going in a suit, then so be it. If partway through the evening it appears to be a little bit more relaxed than that, then you can always lose the tie. But dress up rather than dress down if you are genuinely unclear. I think that's the point of getting in contact with the organisers. If there's a question you want to know about the event, do get in contact with them. I know at the OA here for our events, we often get people calling up saying, I just want to check, what's the actual start time, what's the form, and we're really happy to answer those questions, and most organisers will be happy to answer the questions about the event because they want it to be a success. So make sure you ask those questions beforehand, make sure you put the investment in time in to find out a bit more about the event if you're not sure, because as Keith said, that preparation is key for you to get the most out of that event as well. Just a couple of points to note really. We've got a number of networking events coming up, and do keep an eye out on the Officers Association website for events that are coming up in your region, nationally and locally. The next big one, as Keith says, we've got happening in Bristol on the 29th of March is focused on the defence sector, and we've got nearly 200 people signed up to that event as well. So we've got some final spaces if you do want to sign up for that event, go onto the website. But there's a whole host of networking events and networking opportunities available, from company networking events and insight days,
through to local networking groups, and these can be military networking groups. There's a number that take place in London, including the List. There's a group in Bristol called the Alma, and there's a number of groups in the north, east, and in Yorkshire as well, the Two Roses and Neon, and a new group that's set up in the Midlands as well. They're all networking groups which are open to military personnel to come along, find information and knowledge, and to start building your confidence and network to help you in your transition, or to continue to support you once you've left the military as well. So make the most of that. Thank you very much for your attendance this evening. Apologies for the 2 technical issues we had there, but hopefully you've been able to follow that and got a lot out of it this evening. If you do want to connect with us at the Officers Association, details on the screen of a number of ways that you can use LinkedIn, Twitter, the website, and Facebook as well. And I also just wanted to mention our new employment app that we've launched, which is available on the App Store and Google Play. And as well as all of our services being available on the app, you can also access our network contact list on there as well, which is, we've talked very much about event networking tonight, but is a list of over 500 people that you can contact. They're ex-service people that have all put their name on a list to be contacted and for you to develop your network as well. So do use the app and use it as a good resource, as well as connecting with the OA directly. So thank you for everybody for participating in the webinar this evening. Thank you, Keith, for your insight into the wonderful world of networking. And we hope to see you at one of our future events soon. Many thanks, everybody. And with that, we'll close the webinar this evening.